All right, hi, I'm Cheyenne Meadows, and I'm the High Ability Learning Specialist at the Nebraska Department of Education. And we have another really great installment of the Differentiation for High Ability Learners webinar series today. I'm going to turn it over to Molly, who is going to talk to you today about the power of partnership. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you, Cheyenne. I am really excited to be here today. Love the opportunity to share some of the things that our wonderful team in Bellevue Public Schools has done. Excited to represent them and our district in the power of partnership. My current role is as the K-12 HAL facilitator. And I am fortunate to partner with all of these wonderful educators you see listed here. So let's get started. So the purpose of our time together today is for me to share some of the things that our team has done to really maximize the impact of our services. As many of you know, all of you know, I am certain, there are limitations to the amount of funding that we receive. So while identification is mandated, services are not. So that just necessitates being really creative in how we go about providing our services. My intentions for our time together today are really to make sure that this is a good use of your time. I know how valuable it is, so I really appreciate the fact that you've carved some out to spend with me today. And also just hope that you will leave our time together with some ideas that you want to explore further. So I think it's super helpful before we really dig in to share with you a little bit about the makeup of our district and kind of what our numbers look like and all of those kinds of things. So we'll start there. Our district currently sits at just under 10,000 enrolled students. And of those almost 10,000 students, we have approximately 800 or so students formally identified for high ability learner services. Our students are identified starting in third grade. So when you're looking at that number, that would be third through 12th grade students. And the breakdown in terms of buildings and HAL teachers in Bellevue Public Schools currently, we have 15 elementary buildings, and our 3 HAL educators split their time between 5 buildings. So each of those teachers supports the growth and learning of students in 5 buildings, and then also partners with teachers in those buildings. So their schedules are very flexible, and they kind of change year to year based on the needs. So sometimes it might be a full day in a building, sometimes it might be a half day in a building, sometimes it may be 2 days back to back. And that also depends on what kinds of things they're partnering with teachers on. Our district has 3 middle schools, and we have 1 HAL teacher who travels between those 3 buildings. And again, that schedule tends to shift based on the needs of the building at the time and what kind of partnering the teacher is doing. It's just really phenomenal to watch these educators, kind of their flexibility and their ability to adapt and their brilliant communication with their colleagues to kind of make it all work. And finally, we have 2 high schools in Bellevue, and in each of the buildings, there are 2 classroom teachers that act as HAL facilitators. And then in my role currently, I spend quite a bit of time focusing on supporting the high schools, both the growth of students and also the capacity of teachers. So that's kind of how our team kind of splits up and does our work. Another helpful piece for all of you, just in terms of context, would be understanding kind of how we identify our students. So as I mentioned, our students are formally identified starting in 3rd grade, and our identification process is ongoing through 6th grade. We look at fall and winter map data, and specifically reading and math, and students whose performance falls in the 93rd percentile or above are then screened further with the COGAT 8 later in the year. We recently adopted COGAT 8, which is digital, and it has been so wonderful, just the timeliness, and it's so much more user-friendly for our students. So we are so thankful for that adoption. Based on performance on both of those pieces of data, then students are formally identified in either the verbal or the quantitative domain, or both. And students will have access to services from the time they're identified, between 3rd and 6th grade, all the way through graduation, or when they leave the district, whenever, whichever comes first. It's important too, I think, for us to really express kind of our rationale behind formal identification. We look at it as a layer of accountability for ourselves and our colleagues. So once we have a clear understanding of strengths that a student is demonstrating, then that really points to a need for us to be incredibly intentional about our supports that we put in place to create opportunities for growth. So it is not intended to be kind of a label that students are trying to live up to or justify. Rather, it is a piece of accountability for us as educators. And since we are in a school, you may hear some bells and some kids, which is always good stuff. The next piece I'm sharing with you is what I think is a really helpful tool for stakeholders in our community to understand what HAL services looks like. You'll note, if you kind of take a quick glance at how our tiered levels of services are described, is really intentional, that it allows for a lot of flexibility and responsiveness based upon the needs of the groups of students that we're working with, the needs of the teachers that we're partnering with. So you'll notice that there's a lot of room for us to adjust services to meet specific needs, which I feel is a really important piece. And this is available on our district website for families to reference. And then we also have a HAL handbook that we put together as a team that we're really proud of, that I think is a really great tool. And this is a piece of it as well. So it goes without saying, for all of us, I think, in the state, and Bellevue is no exception, you know, we're so thankful for the support that we get, and that we have such a wonderful, powerful, tiny but mighty team. But the reality is, based on just the numbers, just the ratios, that we really work diligently to try and create opportunities for us to multiply our services. And what that looks like is really building capacity of classroom teachers, because we know that the contact time between students and their classroom teachers is far more consistent than it is with HAL teachers. So working on just constantly finding different avenues to support classroom teachers in their growth and building their capacity to meet the needs of their high ability students is really something that we invest a lot of time and energy in. Kind of our motto as a team is all day, every day, because we believe that our students really need and deserve the opportunity to be given instruction at their level every day, that it shouldn't be kind of a privilege or a periodic opportunity. The other piece here that goes kind of hand in hand with ongoing PL in all of its forms, professional learning opportunities that we provide, is that it is a natural bridge and relationship builder. And so the more connected classroom teachers feel with our team, the more likely it is that we can be really effective at supporting their efforts. So that's another piece of kind of multiplying our services. So the first piece that I want to share with you that has been a really kind of effective and efficient PL avenue, so to speak, was partnering with our educational service unit, ESU3, to create some interactive modules. And so I'm going to pop out of here. Bear with me, because you know how it is when you are moving between screens. Our first module that we created was really intended to help classroom teachers understand more about what house services is and what they could realistically expect from their students, kinds of some of the typical things they might see.
Welcome to House Students. Who are they and what do they need?
So this was really fun.
Click the squares on the left to explore some common
I
characteristics.
kind of talk over myself a little bit, but you'll
students
note that there are kind of these
for how to best
tiles.
support their needs.
So
The Bellevue Public Schools House
we
team is
presented
here to
this
support you and your students.
district-wide
Please don't hesitate to reach out.
during
To learn more,
staff
click on each
development.
category on the left side of the page.
So it was really
Once you have
powerful
completed each slide, be sure
because
to
we were
complete that
present,
reflection on
presented the
Liability
module,
Students form
teachers
at the
moved
end
through
of
the
module.
interactive pieces of it. And then we were there to kind of do a little Q&A. There was also a piece at the very end, a check for understanding and a Google form that teachers could fill out to share kind of any thoughts, ongoing questions. So that was a really well-received module. And that is, as you can see, it is housed in our LMS, which is Schoology. So it's still there for new teachers that enter the district. And the facts have remained the same. And the second interactive module that we created, partnering with ESU3, is focused on differentiation. So as you can imagine, it is tough.
Welcome to the Bellevue Public Schools module on
Little
differentiation.
Soundbite
In
here.
this module, we will touch on several key components of differentiation and share ideas that demonstrate how we can work together to help all students build upon their strengths and create a purposeful path forward.
So again, this module, interactive, teachers move through each of these pieces and we were present to support their exploration. So that was a really, again, another really, really well-received module, still housed in Schoology. So new teachers or teachers new to the district can still access it. So that was a really worthwhile endeavor. So that's one avenue that we've used for professional learning to build teacher capacity, again, to multiply our services. Your educational service units, great resource. Another wonderful opportunity that we have taken full advantage of is new teacher training sessions. So when new teachers enter the district, the instructional coaches have been putting together really fantastic days of training. And one thing that we felt as a district was really a priority is to make sure new teachers, either brand new to the profession or new to the district, had a clear understanding of all the services available to them and things that kind of oftentimes we maybe assume that people are clear about, but they're not. So I was really fortunate to be able to represent our team in multiple new teacher sessions. The first one was all about house services, what it is, what you can expect, what you might expect from students. Subsequent sessions were things like questioning strategies, fostering curiosity, and depth and complexity, just to name a few. And what was wonderful about that, again, it was a professional learning opportunity. It was a relationship building opportunity. People could put names with faces. We shared out really vetted resources and kept it to a minimum so that it wasn't overwhelming. And so that felt like a really worthwhile bridge builder as well. And finally, newsletters, as kind of commonplace as that sounds, it was just yet another way for us to really reach out to the entire district and share what we kind of really intentionally selected as strategies that we thought would benefit teachers, no matter the grade level, no matter the subject area, in meeting the needs of their students. And so what we did was we would create digital newsletters where a strategy was shared, but then also we repeated kind of the notion that we're available to you, we would love to partner with you, let's explore this further. So always kind of repeating that same mantra of like, we're in this together. So that has been a really useful tool. I will say that we have kind of taken a step back this year in sharing too much digitally because a lot of teachers are feeling fairly overloaded just with all things digital. So we've kind of taken a step back this year on multiple levels, but that's okay. These are things that have been very effective in the past. So that's why we're sharing them today. So I keep mentioning over and over how professional learning and the different things that we've done to kind of build relationships. It's really because collaboration is so critical in our work because we are visiting other people's learning environments and trying to help them capitalize on their strengths to support their students. So building those relationships and being a consistent presence for people is really critical. And while really formal and structured and highly intentional collaboration is kind of the ideal, realistically, we know that that's not always possible, especially when we're traveling. And in the case of our elementary HAL teachers, 5 buildings, you can imagine things like conversations in the hallway or in the staff room or via email or connecting during a staff meeting. Those are all really critical collaboration points for us. And so we take full advantage of those opportunities to kind of catch a glimpse of what people might be interested in or might be needing from us. And so that's one kind of piece of our collaboration. And then at the middle and high school level, we're really fortunate that we have the opportunity to join department and team meetings because oftentimes we're almost a fly on the wall, so to speak, as the teachers are having these conversations about different things that are transpiring with their students, or they're expressing a desire to do some different things. And then that gives us an opportunity to kind of jump in and offer up our time and our partnership to support them. So those team meetings are just a wonderful opportunity, as well as staff meetings, for just collaborating and getting a sense of what our colleagues are seeking and what our students are needing so that we can be really responsive in how we go about moving forward with them. So those very same really informal conversations and joining team meetings and so forth is precisely how many of our Pushin partnerships have occurred. It's been a response to something that has been communicated to us or that we've picked up on and then reached out and built kind of some momentum with. So what I'm going to do is share several of the things that we've done over the years, recent years, that have been successful. It's important. The caveat is that none of these things are permanent. You know, everything that we do, and I'm sure it's the same for many of you, if you are providing health services in your buildings and districts, it's very responsive to what the needs are. So we just try to make sure that we're available and adapt to what is working best at any given time in any given building. So here we go. We're going to start with a little early enrichment. So this is one of our favorite things to do when we have the opportunity to move into kindergarten, first, second grade classrooms and provide some early enrichment lessons. And here, you know, there are multiple reasons why this is one of our favorite things to do. For one thing, the youngest kiddos in the buildings are always so delightful, and it gives us an opportunity to work with them, which we normally wouldn't. But also because this kind of situation is an embedded professional learning opportunity for us to share with our colleagues. So when we move into the classroom and we're kind of implementing these different strategies, using some really vetted resources and utilizing, for example, really solid questioning strategies, then our colleague who is the classroom teacher is in that space kind of observing it, and we're modeling it and we're partnering in that experience. So it can be kind of twofold in terms of the impact. Some of the tools that we have used for moving into our primary classrooms include these fabulous books, Pets, which many of you are familiar with. They are just really delightful, provide some really engaging, but more important, intellectually stimulating opportunities to work with younger children. And what's really special about them is that it tends to illuminate and kind of highlight some of the things that students are capable of, or the kinds of thinking that they might do that you wouldn't see during a normal on grade level lesson. And then the other piece is this wonderful recognizing gifted potential. So what we love about this Bertie Kingor tool is that it pairs with trade books, some really fantastic trade books, picture books. So it makes it feel really accessible to classroom teachers. So when we go into the room and we share the book and then we do the activity, it's something that teachers are very inclined to continue doing on their own. And I think they can generalize it to other things that they might be doing in the classroom. And that's the really exciting thing. So in practical terms, this requires some scheduling and some kind of communication between, the primary teachers and the HAL teacher in terms of creating a rotation. Some years we're able to get in multiple times to multiple classrooms. Other years we aren't able to do quite as much. It depends, it varies, but nonetheless, always a worthwhile endeavor. And that Pushin is, again, for kindergarten, first and second grade students. The other piece that comes from this experience is that we meet with teachers after the lesson to share the student, to discuss, teachers share, and we share kind of observations about student performance and different things that we observe. So it's a really great way to focus on some of the things that students are demonstrating that they wouldn't otherwise. Another super exciting talent development initiative that we actually, one of the girls on our team went to a wonderful session at NAGC and put on by the gifted folks from, I can't recall the district, but Florida nonetheless. And it was called Spark Lessons when they did their session at NAGC. So we brought it back to Bellevue, so inspired by it. And we created a very similar talent develop initiative called Thinker Power. And we based it very much on the wonderful work that the folks in Florida did. So we secured a grant through our district foundation, and away we went. It was a really exciting thing to do. So we were really initially focused on our lower ID schools with EL students, some of our buildings that we just weren't seeing the kind of growth that we wanted to see. And we were also focused on, again, primary, that K2 age group. So once again, we revisited some wonderful tools that are kind of from the archive, so to speak. Bertie Kingor has this wonderful tool called the Kingor Observation Inventory. Many of you are familiar. And years ago, our district utilized a folder for teachers, and the purpose was to watch for gifted characteristics to emerge throughout any given day and kind of keep tally marks. And wonderful idea in theory. It just kind of, the fidelity in which everyone used it wasn't as consistent as we would have liked. But we knew the value and the power of the folder, so we revisited it. And so we redesigned it a bit. And when we went into the buildings that we were targeting with this talent development initiative, we were sure to explain the purpose of the tool. So here's the folder. And we really wanted it to be just that, a tool, something that would support the teachers' efforts, give them a wonderful conversational piece to utilize with parents, give them something that they could use to kind of articulate to students some of the things they were noticing. So here are some up close kind of views of the inside of the folder. Categories of gifted characteristics. Again, all of this is credit to Bertie Kingor. And then the right side was really the important piece, and that was designed where teachers would write student names in each of the boxes. We provided mini Post-it notes and gel pens. And so as students were utilizing the Think or Power games and activities, if teachers noticed certain things bubbling up, then they would just write a quick anecdotal note and plunk it down on the student's name, with the goal being over time, if certain things repeatedly appear, great opportunity to reach out to the HAL teacher and talk about maybe some things that are emerging, things that we could do to step in and support that student's growth. And also a wonderful piece for them to utilize for the subsequent school year to kind of give the next year's teacher a heads up. Hey, I've been noticing these wonderful tendencies in this student. Be sure to kind of watch for them. So lots of value in that kind of conversation. And finally, again, we all know the value of good questioning stems. So we included those in the folder as well. And while it's not pictured in the slides, we did create these quick reference cards that would kind of flesh out each of the gifted characteristics or behaviors that you might observe. And we put them on rings, so it'd be handy for teachers to have with them. So again, wanting to equip them with all of the tools to make the most meaningful and impactful use out of this initiative as possible. So that was kind of the teacher side of things. So we put together this wonderful array of games that were non-text dependent, because again, we were focusing on K2 students, possibly EL students. So we wanted them to have the opportunity to demonstrate their strengths without having any sort of barrier to that. And just for the practical side of things, we put all of the different games in totes so that they could be shared within the classrooms at any given building. They were stored in the library so that teachers could check them out. And also, as you can well imagine, before any of this would be successful at all, we had to take the time to go into the buildings and meet with teachers. So it was wonderful. It was so much fun. We went into each of the buildings and we did a PL with the teachers on Think or Power. So first things first, we got the games out and teachers played the games. And then we explored the ways in which they might integrate them into their day so that it was not unmanageable, so that it felt like it was a natural flow of their day. So we talked about, first thing in the morning, during math rotations, during guided reading, things like that, because that was one of the biggest questions. The other big questions were, well, how are the kids going to know how to play the games? So we offered to go in and teach some experts in their classroom so that they'd have some students within the room that knew how to play the games. And then we also had some older HAL students kind of go in and help the students learn how to play the games. So we kind of thought through what could potentially be obstacles for teachers. The response was fantastic. So here are some photos. We, fast forward, and teachers had implemented them into their classrooms. Instructional coaches had supported the implementation as well. So it was a really joyful, wonderful opportunity for the teachers to observe their students doing some really wonderful things, children having the opportunity to interact with their peers and have these really meaningful discussions to kind of justify decisions and explain their thought process and all of these wonderful things. So it was so well received, in fact, that we presented to all of the building principals about it, and many of them opted to use their own building funds to kind of get kits for their schools and utilize them as well. And then the following year, we received another grant and did something similar for 3rd through 6th grade students called Lots of Logic. Similar model, again, really, really fantastic way to kind of push into the buildings and to support classroom teachers in their efforts with students. So now we're going to kind of shift gears away from that wonderful experience that we had into some of the day-to-day partnerships that have developed in classrooms at varying grade levels across the district. So the first one that we're going to talk about is elementary math. So Math is one topic that many of us would agree some of our students show just tremendous strength in and are most definitely functioning beyond grade level. But at the same time, it can be a subject that makes the classroom teacher feel perhaps unprepared or out of their depth a little bit when students are getting beyond kind of the scope of the mathematics that they are comfortable teaching. So one of our HAL teachers in this particular example partnered with a 4th grade teacher. They did some planning together in advance based on some of the standards that needed to be focused on. And so kind of the flow of it was the classroom teacher would introduce and work through kind of the standard or the content on day one, and then the HAL teacher would come in the next day or the day after that with some extensions. So again, staying within that standard, but kind of expanding upon the kind of thinking that was required to move through some of the math that the extension provided. So the tool that we use most frequently with mathematics is Zacaro Math. It will be linked at the end of the slides for you. But what's really fantastic about Zacaro Math is the in-depth explanations and really how it fosters that math talk mentality for our students as they're working through and trying to truly understand what they're doing with their math and not just kind of trying to muddle through or memorize or make it up as they go along. Another example that's really recent and was a really exciting opportunity was for middle school social studies. So again, this was one of those informal collaboration conversations that emerged, and the middle school HAL teacher was able to partner with the 8th grade social studies teacher surrounding the 2020 election, which had all kinds of possibilities attached to it. And so there was a lot of really intentional planning that went into that, and multiple sessions spent talking about electoral college and election details and candidates. Students were really put in the position to evaluate their own understanding, depth of knowledge, opinions, which I think was extremely empowering for them and extremely exciting for the teachers as well. Then at a certain point, the classroom teacher kept about half of the students and the HAL teacher took the other half and focused on debate. And so those students that really wanted to debate some topics were expected to determine their topic, provide ample sources to support their arguments either way, and really a lot of emphasis on how to debate respectfully. So it was a brilliant learning opportunity and experience for all the students. It was the kind of thing where kids were overheard in the hallway talking about it after the fact and how meaningful it was for them. And the cool thing about things like this is it was such an exciting experience for both the classroom teacher and the HAL teacher. That's the kind of momentum that spreads that makes other people want to invite the HAL teacher into the room to get some things going. So those are really wonderful opportunities when those take shape. The next thing that we're going to consider is high school English. So as I mentioned, I spend a lot of time at the high schools and I have the great opportunity to sit in on freshman team meetings. And as you can imagine, during the team meetings, different things are shared, observations, concerns, and recently the conversation kept circling back to academic dishonesty and kinds of assumptions that are made, thinking that students are prepared to avoid it, that they understand the causes of it. And then we kind of narrowed that conversation even further to plagiarism and what that looks like and how to avoid it. And again, conversations circled back to that dangerous making assumptions that high ability or advanced students are going to know better just because. So talked about how direct instruction would really be necessary to equip them so that they could avoid those pitfalls. So I jumped in, was super excited to be able to do it. There are 3 English 9A classes that I created a rotation for. So I was going in. And so we had 3 sessions where I went into each of the rooms 3 separate times to explore what causes academic dishonesty and how plagiarism is just one form of that, and That led to then subsequent sessions of focused on executive function and time management based on the student and teacher responses. So again, all of these things are responsive kinds of push-in opportunities that we're taking advantage of based on what we are hearing as needs and interests of the colleagues that we partner with. So here we have our little Q&A. I went through fairly quickly, but I would be delighted to kind of explore, go back to different topics, or entertain any kinds of questions that you might have at this point.
This is Rachel Hall, Clear Out in Bassett, Nebraska. And I'm curious, like, how did you choose your games? I suppose you guys just kind of have like, these are great games, or how did you choose those games that you put in those packs?
That is such a great question, Rachel, and I'm glad you asked. And just so you know, if you're interested, the tried and true resources slide that I'm going to share next has the list of games that we used, how many players, and what thinking skills they support. So you won't have to kind of generate them, but there is one of the members of our team has really kind of a phenomenal superpower of being able to kind of find the perfect thing for whatever it is that we're seeking. And she utilized information from the session she attended in NAGC and then used her own experience. And then we all kind of piped up because we've all been teaching for quite some time and some of us have children. So we all just kind of like used our best judgment based on what we thought would be meaningful and impactful games. And it turned out we were right. So Rachel, not to worry, the list of games is there, not only for the K2 students for the Thinker Power, but I've also linked the Lots of Logic 3-6 activities for anyone who is interested in exploring that further.
Thank you very much.
Yes, of course.
Great. Can you hear me?
I can. This one have a
Yay.
question?
That was me. I
Oh,
can
hi.
finally I got my mic working finally. I had to do some
Oh,
finagling.
perfect.
So,
Yes, hi Beth.
so I'm kind of thinking about the modules that you guys put together.
Yes.
So ESU helped you put those together? Like as far as like the tech side?
All of it. All of it. So it was really wonderful. And the first one, I want to say Blair had created one similar, and then we just kind of modified it to fit Bellevue.
Mm-hmm.
And we loved it. And it's just a wonderful module. The second one, we kind of reached out and said, hey, we would like to continue with this module series and we want to do differentiation. So the team at ESU3 put something together, and then we kind of went back to the drawing board a couple times because we were thinking K-12 and we wanted to make sure it would, tap into everyone's interest level and so forth. So, but that's how it worked, and how I would go into ESU3 into the booth and read the script, and it would record and all of the things. So it was fabulous. So so thankful that we had the opportunity to do that. And so my suggestion would be to reach out and just see what kind of availability there is to continue, or to initiate something like that.
Yeah, this is very timely because I was just talking about this topic of expanding our reach this morning, and the modules is a really good idea. Oh, and we wouldn't even necessarily have to be there because there's just a small amount of us to be in each building. I mean, it'd be better if we were, but at least we would be able to just send it out and have people work through it,
Absolutely. And I agree. I mean, it really, if you can't be there, it is what it is, right? I mean, there are only so many of you and you can only be so many places at once. We were fortunate in that we could create kind of a rotation between all of us that we were able to be there, but that's not critical as long as you have, I would suggest, and you've probably already thought of this, but some sort of follow-up Google form or something where people could reach out to you, and then you would have kind of a documentation of where there were lingering questions or where there were interests that people wanted to explore further. It worked well for us to have that, and then you've got it all the time, and kind of you have little pockets of different things in different buildings and all of those kinds of things. So
I love that idea. The other one is, I'm
Absolutely.
sorry, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but we were just talking about newsletters too. And I
Yep.
missed it. Did you say, is yours a paper newsletter or digital or both? Or
So
you said,
we use digital. Yep, we use digital. And typically what we have done, as I mentioned, we've kind of backed away from that, kind of situational awareness of where teachers are at right now.
right.
But we would really put our heads together to determine a really impactful strategy or resource. And that would be the only piece in that newsletter. And then it would, maybe we would explore it slightly, but again, we know that we probably have people's attention for maybe a minute or so, during the busy workday. And then we would always put in there, please reach out. We're available to partner with you. We want to support your efforts, so that message was constantly being repeated. And the beauty of a digital newsletter is people can just file that. They can create a folder, and then they can go back to them later, and then it's all still there. So even if
Right.
you only do 4 a year, at least they're there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'd be happy, reach out, Beth, anytime, and I can share some of the things that we've done, actual copies if you want to check them out and just get a sense. Sometimes it's helpful to just get a feel, and then you can adapt it to what works best for your district.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
And Molly, this is Monica from Millard. How are you doing?
Hi, Monica. I'm well. How are you today?
Good. You did a fantastic job during this
Oh.
presentation. I'm sorry I jumped in a couple minutes late. Time just kind of slipped away from me.
Well, yes. Thank you for that compliment, and I completely understand. 3 o'clock is a busy time of day.
Beth asked a lot of the same questions that I was thinking about, but one in particular, when it comes to like the modules for training that you developed with ESU 3, how long are the modules? Like if you're thinking about putting together a new teacher module, how long did you make it?
They're pretty brief.
Okay.
They're pretty brief. I would say they are under 10 minutes, roughly.
Okay.
Now it depends on how long they would spend on maybe the Google form at the end, or there are links to explore resources that are mentioned, but we tried to keep it really succinct, knowing how many demands are on people's time. So it's fairly brief. And it touches on some things that we felt were just super critical as at least jumping off points, So by no means is it a missive or is it comprehensive, but at least plants the seed for subsequent conversations.
Right, because it's something I've been thinking about doing as well. And, how we use Google so much in Millard, and just trying to figure out different platforms and availability and things like that. So I see Adam put a comment in the chat to talk with him. So Adam, I'm sure I'll be reaching out to ask you some questions too.
Good.
Yeah. The other question that I had, I know you mentioned this too, Molly. I would love to see one of your newsletter examples. So I'll reach out to you. I'll email you, because I think, like you said, it just helps get that idea going. I had actually planned on starting a newsletter about a year or so ago, and then COVID hit, and I thought, okay, I can't do this now, because there was just too much virtual stuff happening, and just not good timing. And I guess probably one of my other questions too is that I'm just curious about, so when you do this push-in model, and you talked about some great, different strategies that you've used, and I love the idea about getting into those K2 classrooms and working, with classroom teachers, because that's so pivotal to be able to interact with students early on, and be able to also, like you said, be able to show the classroom teacher that these are some things that they can do as well when you're not there. But I was just kind of curious. I know that you're just like our curriculum too. You've got the elementary, you've got the middle school. So when you do this push in for different topics like math and so on, or social studies, how often do you go into the classroom? I was just kind of curious about that, like what that looks like in Bellevue.
Yeah, of course. That's a great question. So it really depends. It depends on the grade level. It depends on the content. Now, if you're talking about those early enrichment push-ins where we're using kind of like PETs and KOI kinds of things,
Right.
that's on a rotation that varies depending on the teacher's schedule, their flexibility. Ideally, you could get in once a quarter. That would be kind of the ideal.
Right.
Again, keeping in mind that the teachers are covering 5 buildings.
Mhm.
So, that limits their flexibility as well. When you talk about the social studies unit in 8th grade, well, that was something where they carved out quite a bit of time and did multiple blocks to get through all of the things that they planned together. So as much as I would love to kind of share a hard and fast rule in terms of schedules, I feel like one of the biggest criteria, for success in this position is just adaptability and flexibility. So it really varies. But I will tell you, and I think the heart of what your question is, it can impact schedules in other buildings. So if you have committed to partner with the teacher on something and it's going to take multiple visits, then that requires kind of some rearranging of the schedule. And that's not a bad thing. We are fortunate in that we have kind of a flex piece built into our schedule so that we can get back to students if we've missed them and that sort of thing. But it relies upon that partnership between that classroom teacher and that HAL teacher on what that schedule is going to look like. So no hard, fast rule for you in terms of answers with that, Monica. I'm sorry. One thing I wanted to mention before I get too far away from it, and we can get back to that if we need to, but with the newsletter, I think it's super critical that we don't attach anything HAL specific to the title or to the content of the newsletter. We were really intentional about calling it Shake Up the Toolbox. It is kind of a cheesy name, but the idea was, hey, we're sharing out really impactful tools that will increase, your efficacy with all of your students. And oh, by the way, we would be happy to partner with you if you'd like, kind of a thing. So we didn't want anything to come across as too HAL centered because people maybe have a tendency to disregard it by saying, well, I don't really have any HAL kids, so I don't really need to read that or consider that. So that's just a lesson learned maybe along the way that I'm sharing with you if you want to, venture into the newsletter biz. Just a thought.
And that's an excellent idea. Excellent point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I can't take credit for that. It was all of us putting our heads together and realizing that was probably a smart move, to just keep it so that it's really all about great strategies for all kids. And then obviously those strategies lend themselves to meeting the needs of high ability students, but it's kind of packaged in a different fashion. So just
thank you. Thank you so
absolutely. Much. Absolutely.
Hey, Monica. So I was just going to say, well, personally this year with my primary enrichment, I'm going in once a week to classrooms, but I'm pulling out small groups. So it's not the push-in. The push-in would be like what Molly said, probably once a quarter. But this year I'm pulling like small groups and every week that I'm at that building. So it's one day a week.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification, Laura.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense.
All right. If you haven't already, I have a QR up there that you can snap with your phone or your iPad, and you will find the document that I mentioned. I have organized all of the resources for all of the slides kind of in order so that you can kind of mess around in there a little bit and explore what you are interested in. I put my email at the bottom of that sheet so that if you are curious about something or need clarification or just want to chat, you can reach out anytime. My email is there. So, and last but not least, Cheyenne has asked that you fill out this quick survey about today's session. So there's the QR for you. And if anyone has any questions or thoughts or anything, I'd love to hear them before we sign off for the day. This has been a joy for me. I have felt so privileged to share what our wonderful team does. And representing our district, it's pretty special.
Just as a quick note, if you are watching this recording, you can still fill out this survey. So you can use these QR codes that Molly has put up. So even if you are not live with us right now, please do take advantage of those.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think that's it, unless anyone else has any thoughts or questions. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Molly. That
You
was
bet.
really good.